hold of the casualty and we got him in behind the wall. Al started picking a fight behind me with the enemy. I turned my focus to the casualty. I'm not going to say too much, just because I'm friends with his friends. I'm friends with his family. But there was nothing for me to do, and I didn't want to believe that, but I just kept working and working. And then Al just put this gentle hand on my shoulder and he said, "Gary, he's gone, mate. Just he's gone. You need to stop working." And I sat back and I was like, "Al, who is it?" And he replied to me, he said, "It's Chris." Like, Chris was one of the good pals with us within the FST. And I'm not religious or anything, but I just sat with him and I held his hand and I had a few words with him. It just felt like the right thing to do, you know. Even if it didn't do anything for me, you know, if it was important for him, that's kind of why I'd done it. And then Al came over again and he turned around to me and he said, "We need to get to work." And it's as gentle as you like, but just the way he said it, I knew it was really important I got my shit together. And I suddenly became aware that on the far side of the wall, there were voices. Not just random voices, but very, very disciplined voices. I couldn't speak enough of the local language, but I knew that there was a commander. I could hear him giving out orders. I could hear commands from one or two people, and I could just remember thinking to myself, fuck, sounds like he's giving out QPOs. Sounds like he's a fucking section commander, platoon sergeant here. And me and Al, we turned our focus completely to them. I blew my barrel out, put so many rounds through my rifle that I had to cycle my weapon on every single shot. We were honestly toe-to-toe with what's been assessed to be an equivalent fighting force. So there was a platoon of strength of them versus a platoon of us. And we were in a desperate, shitty situation, mate. It was wild. No other way to put it. And we were probably... I'd say we were probably on a higher likelihood of being overrun whenever I heard this whistle overhead. And as soon as I heard the whistle and knew exactly what it was, but I looked up and I seen this A-10 come in, American tank buster, the Warthog, come in, mid-level, kind of show of force, popped off a few flares. And I quickly got on the radio and I turned around to Bobby, the forward air controller, and I was like, "Bobby, mate, tell me he's got eyes on me." And Bobby was like, "No, mate, he can't see you." And I was like, shit. So I got a smoke grenade, popped the smoke grenade up my feet, and I was like, "Tell me he's got eyes on smoke." And Bobby came back and he was like, "Yeah, he's got eyes on smoke." And I was like, "That's my position. There's two of us here. We've got one casualty." And the pilot came back and he was like, "Yep, confirm, I've got eyes on you." And I said, "Bobby, mate, everything to the east of me is enemy. Everything on the far side of the wall." And the pilot turned around and he went, "They're on top of him." And Bobby was like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Mate, I don't have time to give you these 9 lines." So those 9 legal lines of information for us to call that aircraft in. Don't have time for a 9-liner, mate. Just tell him to do what he needs to do. Fucking Bobby was like, "You know what, mate? Just need you to do what you can do." And the pilot, he had every right to turn around and say, "I am not comfortable. I don't know where friendly troops are. I don't know where civilians are. I don't know the displacement of all of these people on the ground. You're asking me to engage dangerously close to this little Irishman who's on the ground who I can hear in the background. I'm not willing." And the pilot turned around and he said, "Tell him I'm tipping in." And that's one of the final things you hear, mate, because what you do is you look up at the aircraft and you make sure that it's aiming towards the enemy position. And as soon as you're happy that it's aiming towards the enemy position, you say, "You're clear hot." And you give him like your initials. And I looked up at this aircraft after Bobby said he's tipping in. And I can remember it aiming straight at me. And I thought to myself, holy shit, I've never seen that before. And then I remember thinking to myself, well, they're just on the other side of the wall. It's exactly what he needs to be doing. And I turned around to Bobby and I was like, Bobby, tell him to send it. And Bobby was like, you're clear hot. And he'd done this gun run on the other side of the wall. And it was bizarre because I seen the smoke come out of his gun. And normally you hear that burp of freedom, that burp. And it was completely different. It sounded like 100 grenades went off on the other side of the wall beside me.
I think the thing I was most surprised about was when we started going through sort of brigade level rehearsals. You know, one is the scale of it, and I've got some pictures we'll look at later. You know, when you look at the bridging equipment, the artillery, the AS-90s, the US augmentees, the Cobra attack helicopters, because I was looking after forward air controllers and snipers. So, wow. You know, we got to engage with them. And I think on the day we were told we were crossing into Iraq, after there'd been a sort of naval, you know, suppression of the Iraqi military, air suppression, was that actually crossing the berm was led by combat engineer tractors. You know, so I thought, oh, you know, Recce will be first, but no, it was the tractors, armored JCBs that you'll be familiar with.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you cross over the border, and was it what you expected? Because
I didn't really know. I think I wouldn't, you know, I think given what our colleagues who went and did subsequent tours experienced with the insurgency, I think for Telic 1, I'm careful with my choice of words, but for us, it was high intensity, but the conflict element for my brigade was limited. We were up against an Iraqi conscript division that had essentially, after they'd been, you know, softened up with US air power, had essentially, you know, dropped their stuff in their shell scrapes, tank holes, and left. So a lot of the positions that we were scouting and looking for were actually empty. There wasn't any resistance. There were a few sort of pockets here and there. I remember at one point we'd league it up, and literally, you know, we were shaving, right? We were shaving, and there was some small arms fire came around the squadron leader, and it was, you know, one or two people taking a pot shot, one or two sort of RPG attacks, but they were you know, quite long range, so low risk. So relatively, for the first few weeks, as we sort of encircled and had to put a blocking line north of Basra in place, that was relatively went to plan. There are a few, you know, I think there's some minefields that your engineers cleared or at least marked for us, but it wasn't high intensity conflict. That was to come for others. Yeah.
What was you working on whilst you're at Yeovilton? What was the aircraft?
Well, I start off with a Wessex 5.
And that is a
helicopter.
Okay, just for people like me that don't know all the aircraft.
Well, your favourite film is... Sorry to interview you, but...
Yeah.
Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket's a great film. Yeah.
There's a helicopter towards the end of the film, I believe, flying over trees in the UK. Looks very good as Vietnam, doesn't it?
Yes. Fake Vietnam.
It's all filmed in the UK. And one of them, depending on what website you look at, is a Mark of Wessex. The Navy had Mark 1, Mark 3 and Mark 5. When I joined a Mark 5. It's a troop carrier. 16 troops, all big, hairy Royal Marines, bootnecks, as we know them in the Navy, get in the back and do all their fighting stuff from the back of the helicopter. Abseiling, being daft, leaping out, you know, on a bit of string. What's that all about? But, you know, they're trying to do it. So this is a troop carrying helicopter. And I start on 707 Squadron on the 26th of January.
Yeah.
It's a training squadron, and that you get trained up on that particular aircraft to learn how to maintain it. You've got 2 qualifications you need to learn. One is qualified to maintain, QM. And then the second one is qualified to sign, QS. However, the big sticking point is you have to be 17 to become QS. You're deemed not worthy before that age.
Okay.
I'm 16 and a half. So I've got 6 months to wait. So I'm in no hurry to become QM. So I just, I get boned off to do various side projects, one of which is Clean Concord.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It arrived in the summer. I've read that it arrived in September. I beg to differ. Because
Okay.
me and a few other guys cleaned it. And that means getting onto the wings, scrubbing brush, mop, whatever, and cleaning the aircraft. And it arrived in the summer of 76. Now, anyone who's that era, 1976 was a scorcher.
Mm.
And it lasted from June right the way through until the August, and then the heavens opened.
Okay. Why was Concorde there?
It's in the Fleet Alarm Museum.
Right, but the one that arrived was retiring. Is that what you're saying?
It was one of the, was it 002 or other than that? But whatever number it was, it had all the gadgetry, all the electronics on it. They're all behind panels. But before that happened, there were all the switches, dials, cockpits were all open to misuse.
Another time he said to me, he goes, could you give this handwritten letter to the Queen? And this was a common occurrence, and I know I say it like it's every day, but to me it was every day because that's how they did things, all right? So, and it was coming up towards Christmas, so, and he said to me, he goes, this must go to the Queen directly. It mustn't go to anyone else. It can go to her private secretary. And they're so traditional in the sense, at the back of it had the wax stamp, right? So I then, at the time, the royal household gave me a little moped to go around and deliver stuff, and it was my way of getting around and doing recce's and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we did that. And I off I went in my little scooter, and it was only like a 50cc thing, but it was great. All right, so off I went in my little 50cc, and we had BP, which was Buckingham Palace, and then we had KP, which was Kensington Palace, right? So all these myths about there's a tunnel that leads straight to and from, that's not true. Otherwise, I would be using that tunnel. All right, so I go down my little moped, go into the gate. So as you're looking at Buckingham Palace, you've got, on the right-hand side, you've got a gate, and that gate is the family entrance, the family gate. And then you've got a door on the right-hand side, which was for minions like me who work there, right? So we go in there, and for those who don't know, most of you probably will not know, but in Buckingham Palace basement, down the floor, there are different lines, and the different lines take you to different people. So, for instance, at the time, the late Queen was obviously still alive. The gold one was for the Queen. Then you had the blue for Prince of Wales, and so on, right? So because the palace is massive, it's easy to get lost. So a lot of people were getting lost, and they even had at that time, I don't know if they've still got it, but they had at that time the old rickety lifts where you close the outer doors and then the inner doors, right?
Okay.
Yeah, still had that. And then there was like a roundy thing you went down to the basement with, right? So I get down to the basement, and bearing in mind, right, I've got a pair of combat trousers on, not army combat, but blue combat trousers, my army boots, and a biker jacket and a bike helmet in my hand. But I've got this letter which is inside my pocket, okay? So I take the letter out, and I'm walking along, and I'm following the gold line. So as I walk along, you know, like when the milk gets delivered to supermarkets, you get those big cages, right? Inside those big cages is where all the food and all that is for the delivery for the day. And there's a load of them all stacked up on one side. So I obviously have to walk around it, right? So I get to it, and there's someone walking towards me. So I move over, and being the polite person I am, she then walks towards me, and at that time, I'm 5'11". I've shrunk, so that's why I say at that time. So at that time, I'm 5'11", and this little lady must be about 5, maybe just over 5 foot. Anyway, she was walking towards me, and I move out the way, and she said, "Oh, thank you very much." And then I look at her, and it's only the Queen, right? So I was in such an awkward space, I kind of did a bow curtsy at the same time and nearly headbutted her, right? Because it was such an enclosed space. And she's wetting herself laughing. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she said, no, it's fine, you know. And that was it. So I carried on walking. And I thought, oh, shit, I've got a letter for her. running back. I said, I've got a letter for you. This is from the Duke of Gloucester. And she went, oh, yes, that's great. Thank you. She took it. And that was that. And I just thought, oh, my fucking God. Probably the only one time I'm going to meet her. And I nearly headbutted her, right? It was something like out of a Benny Hill scene, right? So a couple of weeks later, it was Christmas time. This was coming up to Christmas. They had a big family Christmas dinner, and there was everybody there. So we go into the garden entrance, and I'm sat in the car, like most of the chauffeurs were all sat there, waiting for them to come out. And although we did have conversations with each other, all of us had TVs in our cars, so we all just sat and watched telly, right? So, and why wouldn't you? You've got a seat with a massager and a heat warmer, and why would you not? Right, so I'm sat there watching telly, and I look up, and I'm literally parked directly opposite from about 20, 30 metres away. There's like a set of double doors, and the doors open, and these little corgis come running out. Okay, and I look up, and I think, oh, must be obviously the Queen's dog's going for a little walk around the gardens. Anyway, I then look at my TV. I look up again, and she's there, right next to the window. Again.
Next to your window?
Yeah, next to my window. She was just walking past, but she wasn't knocking on the window or anything. I'm sat in a car. I nearly head-butted the steering wheel. Every time she's seen me so far, I've been sat in an either awkward position. So I'm like, looking at her, and I thought, oh, for God's sake. So then she just smiles and grins and walks away. Anyway, about 2 or 3 weeks later, after Christmas, we all had our holidays or whatever. And then it was in fact, it was the start of the garden party. So it was coming up to spring or latter end of spring. And I see her again. And this time I was going to smash this, right? So I'm waiting again. And she comes out. I get out of the car. And I stand there and I do a little curtsy. It was very bad. But I did a curtsy and I said, hello, Mum. I said, this time I'm going to get it right. And she said, absolutely perfect. And she got the joke, because every time I did so, I either headbutted her or I headbutted the car, and she must have thought, well, who is this dickhead, But yeah, she was fantastic. But so that was me working at the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester's home.
When it comes to your incident, can you share at what point this was within that deployment and how it took place, if you're okay to share that?
Of course. It was about 8 months into my 12-month deployment there. And it was almost immediately after my 2 weeks of R&R leave back to the United States. I was one of the latest ones, the last of our company to go back. I let my team members do their leave first, but I also timed it in conjunction with my firstborn's first birthday. So I got to go home and see my son turn 1. I got to witness the whole family gathered together for the birthday and our Thanksgiving. It was November. And it's just, I call it the best last page in the photo album you could possibly get. And it was great. And then I flew back to the battlefield, Kandahar. We jumped into a convoy out to meet my team. And we got a supply convoy. We jumped on back, kind of tagged along in a supply convoy out to our command outpost. And along the way, right on Route 1, there was a call. We weren't on duty. I just had my luggage in the back of the truck. And I say, EOD, we got something on the side of the road. We want you to take a look. No sense in sending out the QRF with the EOD from the local base, because we were right there. So set up the security cordon, threw the luggage off of the robot out of the truck. And guess what? We found pressure plate ID with a jug and a 9-volt battery. So the robot did its thing, but it couldn't get the jug out of the hard packed dirt. So since I had it taken apart, I didn't get into the bomb suit. Didn't no reason to. I had a metal detector and my evidence kit, and I made my approach on foot out of the truck. And about 20 or 30 meters from the original ID, there was a secondary device that hadn't been detected until my foot found it. So for some reason, I'm not quite sure how it was set up, but the pressure plate was offset from the explosive because the blast only hit me in the head. I'm not quite sure how. Maybe it was that hard pack again, channeling it up, but it kind of came from my right to left and from beneath. And my family, the men in my family are very hard, thick-skulled, so it was the perfect place to hit me. But it took both of my eyes and it cracked my skull, so I was leaking spinal fluid through my nose. It blew out my eardrums, but I still had my sense of hearing intact. It's just injured. And from my neck down, I was virtually untouched. So I'd gotten punted into the air, landed on my knees and elbows, still conscious, definitely rung my bell, but the lights were out. And I thought my helmet had been pushed over my face from the blast. That's why I couldn't see. So I reached up to grab my helmet to find that the helmet was gone. And that's when I thought, oh no, this is bad. My first sergeant's going to kill me for losing that. But yeah, things that go through your head at the time. Yeah. My team came and grabbed me and dragged me back to the safe area behind the truck. And I wasn't far from the Kandahar airfield, so within minutes, the medevac chopper was lifting me off and taking me right back to the airfield. Within 48 hours, I was in Bethesda, Maryland at Walter Reed.
Did you find those 2 years to go pretty quick because you had those kind of type of jobs on that maybe you were concentrating on it for a period of time?
Yeah, it was. I loved the role that about. It was super fast paced because you would have multiple. Obviously, there's always jets going out. The RAF is tiny, really, compared to like the Yanks and stuff like that. But there was always something happening, so it was so fast paced, and you were given a lot of responsibility because I was the most junior rank by a mile. Everyone else was things like squadron leaders, sergeants, flight sergeants. So you were really like a junior, but you were, in some respect, you were treated like an equal. So it was a really nice place to be.
That's cool. It sounds like a really proud moment of your first few years in the military. So I'm going to put you on the spot again and just see if there's another nugget there that you wanted to share that really sticks out again, because it sounds like that is a very memorable part of your career, doing a role that you weren't actually ever going to do, but seemed to spend a couple of years doing. So yeah, anything else you want to share?
Yeah, so the Bryce was fantastic. There was some amazing. I would say another example that I did like. We had the red arrows into Bryce before, and basically the way it works with jets and pilots, they have their own hours, so they have very strict hours. And it's put down by like civilian aviation. So if there's a delay with a military jet of a couple of hours, sometimes you have to delay it a whole 24 hours because that pilot's hours are out. He can't have the delay and still make the whole flight. And we had this flight going out to Afghanistan with troops, desperate obviously to get out there so they could take off the other guys out there and come home. And it was delayed by around 2 hours. And we had basically the red arrows come in, and he was like, oh, well, we need to do our flying this afternoon. I went, you can't go because if you take the next slot, then we have to delay 24 hours for the Afghanistan jet. And can you guess what happened? Can you guess what actually happened?
Did the red arrows actually take precedence?
He pulled rank. He said, we're red arrows, we're taking the slot. So they took the next slot, even though they could have delayed 15 minutes. And what happened was that whole flight with the guys going out to Afghanistan was delayed a whole 24 hours because red one pulled rank. So stuff like that where you just like, wow. you just can't believe that people make those decisions.
Yeah, that is crazy. And Bryce is fairly busy, right? It has a lot of flights going in and out in the sense of military troops and stuff. But yeah, I suppose when you get a special crew like that? That doesn't happen too often. Because then, or are they based out of Bryce? This is me sounding silly now.
No. They were mainly based out of Scampton in Lincolnshire. They would do a lot of the flying out there. So they were never based at Bryce. They were doing, I think it might have been doing like basically training for maybe an air show or something like that. And they thought they were the bee's knees, but no one in the RAF cared about them because they're just a rank. But they maybe get above the station a little bit. Some of them anyway. I'm sure not all of them, but some of them maybe thought that they were walking gods, but not to the rest of us.
The Hills phase is all the same. So briefing course and Hills phase is the same for everyone.
Okay.
So everyone goes through the same process. And then you go, depending on what branch of the Special Forces you're joining, you then would go off to do your specific. So the Special Forces communicator route is slightly different to SAS and SBS. So SAS and SBS then prepare to go to the jungle. The Special Forces communicators then prepare to do a field scenario-based training package and a comms phase as well, because ultimately you need to still operate in those environments, but also the comms equipment and utilize the comms equipment that the group use. So you go off and do that phase for the next period, which is good couple of months. So it's pretty full on. For the first 6 weeks is in the field. So you're different elements, different environments, different things, different comms training. But the main course go off and do the jungle, and we do a comms phase and an exercise phase.
And with your kind of background, did you find that background was helpful for you to do that part of the Special Forces? Yeah,
definitely. I'd operated in that environment with my time at 299 to some degree. I'd worked with the guys, so I knew. I felt very comfortable in that environment, as in the way I operated. Obviously, I was still on a selection course and I was still under scrutiny and I was getting grilled all the time and punished all the time for a number of different things and beasted. But ultimately, from what I was delivering, from my confidence, I felt pretty confident in the environment that I was in terms of being able to utilise and operate the equipment, to be able to operate in that environment under that pressure, because I'd already operated in that environment.
That's cool.
Which helped massively.
Good. Then after that phase, is this where you kind of would come back together in the SF?
Yeah. So the rest of the selection then is, so you get to a point in selection where again you're not guaranteed a pass. You're not guaranteed a pass until you've physically passed the course. But there's a little bit more in terms of you're likely to get to the end of the course, the end of selection, if you continue going on the way you're going. You come back together and then you do a number of other bits of training together, including your jumps package. So your parachute course, and then
how do you find that?
I actually really enjoyed it. Yeah, I actually really
enjoyed it. Jumping out of a
it.
decent vehicle.
Yeah. It was quite funny because there was a lot of guys. There was a lot of guys who just would not stand in the door and look out the back door, and it is quite terrifying, but it's fucking pretty cool. And I was always the person that would end up at the first person in the stick to jump out first because no one else wanted to do it. Everyone else would follow my back out. So. I think there's a video on my actually on my Instagram of me, some of my jumps video, and I'm always the first person out of the aircraft. And it's a rush of adrenaline. It's pretty cool.
You weren't ever shitting it?
Yeah, of course. I'd be stupid if I said I wasn't. But the thrill and the excitement that you get from jumping out of an aircraft is pretty phenomenal. It was just a massive buzz.
I ended up commanding 658 Squadron, which was a TA squadron, so it had a lot of ex-regular pilots, and it was all solo flying Gazelles, most of it VIP flying. Sometimes sporty exercises, but generally it was VIP flying. And actually, do you know what? That was awesome fun. It's like somebody saying, here's the keys to a Ferrari, just drive it on your own, go and do what you want. Because you normally fly two crew, And whilst you can fly it on your own, you very rarely get the chance. So to be able to do lots and lots of solo flying was just fantastic. And that was one of the points where you get to meet a lot of different people. You know, some actually reasonably challenging situations as well. For example, I don't know if you remember the Comp A and Comp B. So if somebody is abroad and they've got a family member who is seriously ill on the verge of passing away, then they would do everything they could to get you back. And about 3 or 4 times in my couple of years there would be a call, it could be 10 o'clock at night, saying there's a Hercules or there's a C-130, whatever, landing at Bryce Norton, a Comp A. You need to get this person all the way down to St Ives and Cornwall or wherever it be. Excuse me. And so in the middle of the night, you go and pick somebody up and just take them somewhere. And sometimes you knew you wanted to get them there. That was just, you know what it was like. So you would do everything you could to get a brethren so where he needed to be. And sometimes that meant flying, you know, come back to this point about learning to fly in clouds. And a Gazelle, no way to trim it out. It's hard work, but it's great. You know, doing a long trip down to St Ives, 2/3 of it in cloud all the way, you're absolutely knackered by the time you get back home. But wow, you know, what a feeling of pride to be able to help somebody out like that. So there's some great things. And then the other thing, which was a real privilege, and it's quite prevalent at the moment, just with Mike Jackson passing away, you know, General Sir Mike Jackson. So he was, I forget his title, I think it was CNC Land. So he based down in just down the road from Netheravon, and that's where his home was. He used us a lot, so we used to often fly him into London or wherever it be. But I found a number of times I was flying him where he'd be singing for his supper, so he'd be a guest speaker at an event somewhere in a hotel somewhere, and and so I'd end up just picking him up, and those places where you could get a helicopter into, it's not a designated landing site. Normally they have to be fleet cleared, but you get into during the day, but you couldn't get back in at night. So basically I had to stay there and wait, and then at the end of the night, and he loved his whiskey. A number of times, you know, I put my head round. He said, "We'll be leaving at 11." And I put my head round the corner of the bar. You know, I'd be somewhere tucked away at the back. Put my head round, and he'd go, 2 more minutes in. And then about half an hour later, another couple of minutes in. And he'd get in the helicopter, and we'd have some lovely chats. You know, on the way back. You know, very astute man. I was
going to ask, what's your experience with him? Not many people got to meet him on that kind of level.
Intelligent. You know, he would love to just grab hold of the map off my knee when I'm trying to fly, and point out, yeah, that's this place. And actually, for somebody who's not used to flying off a night flying map, and as I say, just looking at conurbations of lights, yeah, it was good. And he was always good. He was always really, really pleasant. Other things, so for example, if we would always have a cut off where we say, right, there's not enough. The weather's looking really bad. I might not be able to get you into London, for example. And he'd go, don't care, try. And whereas others would go, I'll get a car, and be really annoyed about the Army Air Corps not being able to fly it. So you can't fly in certain conditions. And especially to get into London, because you've got no airfield to land on as such, or to come down through clouds. And but he would just go, try. And so we'd try and push it right to the limit. And if I couldn't, you could break off and Farnborough, just drop him off at Farnborough, and you get a car from there. So he was always really quite supportive of you, have a go, which was really good. And I think the other thing, which was, it was just a little moment with him, which was super. My eldest, Angus, was born while I was flying, not while I was flying, but while I was at Netheravon. And he knew that because he'd asked me, he'd always asking, you know. And I flew him back one Friday and landed him. There was a small little field about a mile away from his house, and there were no cars there to pick him up. So we flew over his house, and he couldn't see his wife's car or anybody's car there. So we did 2 or 3 circuits just to try and make a noise, just in case people remembered you need to pick the general up. And anyway, nobody was there. So we went up to the field, and I landed on, and I was just about to shut everything down. I said, "No, don't shut down." I said, "No, it's all right, General. I'll just shut it down while I'm waiting." He said, "No, you're not to wait." I said, "General, there's nobody here. I can't leave you here on your own." He said, "Ian, you've got a son. Go home to your son." And I thought, wow, what a bloke.
On day one, week one, I'm standing there, and I'm one of 59 blokes on parade, and you got the troopy and the sergeant. He comes up, he goes, "Right, fellas." And if they ever say that, you know something's coming. And he's like, "Just to let you know, in 18 months' time, I'm looking at less than 10 of yous to be standing here with a lid."
Wow.
I was like, wow. And he said, look around, and he said, try and establish who you think is going to be there towards the end. And at this point, I honestly thought, that's not me, But I met two mates who I thought, could make it towards the end. So I stuck with them and, made friends. We, turned up for extra fizz nights and stuff like that. And then 18 months later, I was one of 9 who passed out in the original troop, and I was made up.
Yeah, nice.
I just stuck with it. And, towards the end, I did deserve to be there.
Yeah. And you know what? I would say potentially that being a reserve and, the parade nights through the week and then having to do it the weekend or every other weekend, that's harder. Because when you're regular and, I'm only going off army, but when you're regular, you're in the mix all the time.
Yeah.
You wake up, you do it. You wake up, you do it. You're doing it every single day. Whereas you've got to keep motivation.
Well, there's always an option out.
You're right. Yeah.
So
you go home. And then
yeah. So we would turn to Friday, and get ready for the weekend and go get thrashed. And, being in this country, the elements are quite often always against you. But you turn up, and I remember one lad, and we're getting ready for the weekend. He's packing his bag and he's getting all the stuff, and he's just looking up at his going out rig, and he's like, "I'm not doing it." He said, I'm off into town." And he put stuff on, and he just went, and we all went on this weekend, but he just went on the lash. And funny enough, he didn't pass out.
He didn't pass out, yeah.
No. So there's always that in the back of your mind. You can always pull an injury. You can say whatever you like to get off. But fundamentally, I got taught, in order to make it, you just need to turn to, put maximum effort in, and just keep turning up.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got to do.
But hats off to you. You got through it. 50 didn't. But yeah, when you sit down and think about it, it's actually more difficult because you've got that opt out. I just never contemplated it. Typically, when you go to your first regiment, your first squadron, there's a bit of a welcome party, let's say. How was it for you getting to your first unit?
Well, it's a bit 9 Squadron itself. You've obviously got the new guy kind of vibes that you get whenever you go to a new squadron, but you also get you're a non-trained person, so you're treated a bit like a kid to begin with. Like, you can't sit at certain tables in the scoff house, you can't go into certain corridors in the blocks because you're not airborne. However, I would say 9 Squadron was my best my best posting, because everyone's in it together. It's like a brotherhood as such. Even for the guys that aren't badged, they're still treated. So every single week, Saturday during the summer, we had barbecues. I was probably one of the last kind of people that come through that got initiation as such, or it's not really initiation, it's just a piss up. And you just have to drink whatever's in front of you. So yeah, that was interesting, but it's all good fun. It's all part of it.
And when you get there, is it long before you're off to do the P company?
They try and put you on it as soon as possible. So I've known people literally turn up on day one and they're straight on it. Okay. I was there for, I think it was a month or so before I was on beat up. So to go actually onto P company, it's changed since my first time round. But my first time round, you had to go and do a beat up course, which is 2 weeks. Then you done pre-power, which was another 2 weeks. Then you actually went on to P company. The engineers are known to have the hardest beat up training throughout the brigade, which was interesting. So I strained my back actually in the first beat up phase and got absolutely treated like absolute dog shit. because they thought I was blagging it, but I wasn't. I passed the 20-mile tab and got sent up to P Company. Then literally a week into pre-power, my hip gave out.
Same injury as before?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got RTU'd and back to regiment. But it was frustrating because I was very fit. I could run a sub-9, easy sub-9 mile and a half with ease. I think the slowest time I ever ran was 9.5 minutes, and I purposely ran it that slow because we were about to go on leave and I didn't want to come back and have a worse mile and a half, so I deliberately ran a slow PFA. So it was very frustrating. And again, I was still playing rugby, so all the full screws that were on the training staff all knew that I was physically fit. So when I was going on and getting injured, it was probably quite frustrating towards them. So yeah, I got RTU'd.